Welcome back, everyone. We are Two Dudes Talking 80s. I'm John. That's my partner in crime, Lewis.
Hello.
That's very witch-like, and I guess it's appropriate because we're getting close to Halloween. And once again, we're going to continue talking about our favorite 80s Halloween movies. And this one we're going to talk about is a special day on the calendar. Of course, we're talking about Camp Crystal Lake and Friday the 13th. So, Lou, do you remember seeing the first Friday the 13th?
I did. I remember hearing more about it because we were, I think, in middle school or we were going into middle school in 1980. And I remember a lot of people talking about it and me having these like very descriptive conversations about what it was like and the characters in it and how it ended. And it was the years after that that I actually saw Friday the 13th.
Gotcha. I don't think I saw that one in the theaters. Saw a lot of these movies originally in the theaters, but that's one I definitely missed. But it kind of, well, I mean, Halloween, I think, started the trend, but, or you can say Texas Chainsaw Massacre even. But this one kind of, everyone kind of copied this, this formula, right? Friday the 13th, it kind of became the formula for a lot of the resurgence of horror movies that we saw, the slasher films. There's so many that you could just rattle off, and I'm not going to rattle them off because there's way too many, but you kind of pick a holiday and kind of go with it. And that's kind of what we saw, a lot in the 80s. But Friday the 13th is the kind of the one that really started it all. And it's funny because even the people, the producers, the director who decided to create this film, were basically trying to rip off Halloween, and they readily admitted it.
Wow.
So the director was trying to get interest in this film. I don't even think he had directed maybe he directed one other thing before, and so he put out an ad in the trade paper. Friday the 13th, and it looks like the logo's breaking through glass and says like the scariest movie of all time. And he sold a movie on that. He didn't even have a script.
That's crazy.
So he didn't even have a script, didn't have a concept. And then, it's like, okay, well, cool. He sold the movie. Now we got to go make it. And we don't have a script. We don't have a cast. We don't have this, that. And so, through luck of the draw, this is really what they came up
That's incredible. I had no idea about that.
with. Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting that he was able to get that done. And from what I heard, is he had an investor, but he was kind of reluctant to have this guy invest all the money. I don't know why he wanted. I think he may want a couple investors or whatever. And so he said, nah, and he kept looking for investors. Realized that he couldn't find the investor, and so he went back to the original guy and said, "Hey, okay, I'll let you invest all the money in it." He goes, "Oh, good thing you called. I was just like on my way to buy a property, and that would have been the money."
Wow.
So yeah, actually, one of the most successful horror movies of all time. I think it might be third on the list. I think if you look at money made versus money paid out, I think the Blair Witch is probably the most successful, and I think Halloween is second, but Friday the 13th is right there.
You know,
So
it's funny because that makes sense if you think about it, especially back in the 80s. I mean, the special effects in the movie are not crazy. It's probably pretty low budget if you think about, the cost of everything. And yeah, I was thinking about this before I came out, logged on is teenagers having sex and getting impaled. It's like the cornerstone of American entertainment.
in the 80s, it sure was. It's funny you mentioned the special effects because Tom Savini, who is kind of a legend in the special effects, did the special effects, and they found him from Dawn of the Dead. He did the Dawn of the Dead, and they thought that would be really cool, to have somebody that had that kind of ability. So they hired Tom Savini. Tom Savini's done millions of movies since then. But yeah, Friday the 13th, he did that one. And we had some really cool special effects. Though I've got to say, my favorite is Kevin Bacon's death. I remember seeing that, and it really, freaked me out the first time because for those that don't remember, Kevin Bacon is in the bed, gets his head pulled back, and a knife comes up through the bed and through his throat, and it starts spurting blood. Really cool effect, right? What apparently happened is because it was such a low budget movie, Tom Savini was under the bed along with his apprentice. Tom Savini does the knife to Kevin Bacon's mannequin. He had nice nails. Does it to the mannequin, and they were supposed to
Hmm.
spray it out with a fire extinguisher that had been filled with this fake blood. Well, of course, as they go to do it, somehow it dislodged or wasn't working. So the guy, his apprentice, grabs the tube and starts blowing it out through his mouth, which is why it shoots out so much. And apparently, what they used for fake blood had some sort of chemical in it that was toxic.
Oh
So as
no.
soon as he does it, he goes and he runs down and he washes out his mouth. Um, the other poor soul who um, had the arrow in his eye, I guess the blood went underneath the latex and got in his eye.
Oh
And so
geez.
he had to deal with it. And when they finally yelled cut, he's washing it out. He actually lost his sight in that eye for like 6 months, they say.
Oh my gosh, man.
And that was Bing, if I remember correctly, that's Bing Crosby's son.
Is it? I didn't realize
Bing
he was in the
Crosby.
movie.
Yeah, Bing Crosby's son is the one with the that gets with the the arrow in the eye. So a little bit of trivia there. It's funny though because I saw Tom Savini recently at a Monster Palooza convention, and there are a lot of people there that do the monster movies, sell the shirts, do makeup effects and things like that. And he was there, and I thought for sure like he'd have a huge line, right? This guy is like a legend in that business. There was nobody there to talk to him, like nobody getting his autograph or photo. So I asked a guy, I said, "Hey, what's up with Tom Savini? Like, there's nobody in his line." And I would think for this kind of, convention, like he would be the rock star here. And I guess he's known for kind of being an a-hole.
Ah.
And because of that, um, he's not well liked, and people, he's not doesn't treat people the best. So that's why if you go and see him, you're not going to see a huge line, which is kind of sucks. But
That's sad, man.
well, sometimes you got to be careful how you treat people. But what are you going to do? But the other thing that's really interesting about this movie, and a lot of people forget, and for those that saw the original Scream movie, you remember. Did you ever see Scream?
Gosh, did I see Scream? I
Drew
don't think that I did.
Barrymore.
I might have seen bits and pieces of it, but never like completely in a sitting.
So what everyone forgets is who the killer is in the first original Friday the 13th.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, and not Jason.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of the lady, right? It was Jason's mom, but
Mrs.
that's
Voorhees.
what was it?
Mrs. Voorhees.
Mrs. Voorhees.
Jason
And
Voorhees' mother.
and I find that fascinating because they came out obviously out with a bunch of different Friday the 13th sequels, and it's always Jason with the mask. But yeah, if you didn't watch the first one, if you're a youngin and you've never actually watched the very first one, Jason played a minuscule role in it. I think he had like maybe 5 seconds in the final scene of it,
Yeah.
and it just set it up for sequels. That was all that it was.
Well, it's crazy you mention that now because the lady who played Mrs. Voorhees, Betsy Palmer, apparently was had been a successful actress, and they sent her the script to portray Mrs. Voorhees, and she reads it and she's like, "Yeah, this thing's a piece of shit." And she's like, "Yeah, why would I do this movie?" And then she started having problems with her car, and she's like, "Oh, that's why I'll do this movie because my car is going to crap, and I need to get money to fix it or something." So that's the only reason she did it.
Wow.
Eventually, she came around, but she kind of like a lot of people. They're like, "No one's ever going to see this movie. Who cares?" Well, obviously, lots of people have seen that movie, and a lot of people really care. But she, finally came around to it and was very popular at the convention scene up until the time of her death. But yeah, she didn't think anything of it. But if you go back and watch it, and even she doesn't really play a very big part in it.
Right.
Most of the time, you don't know who the killer is in the original Friday the 13th. But she finally gets on scene and you see her and you think, oh, this person's gonna protect this, protect the people that have survived and everything. And then she starts talking about how the camp counselors weren't watching her son Jason and let him swim without watching him. And then she starts doing that voice where she's all, kill her, mommy. And it's so creepy. She did an amazing, amazing job.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the scene that I remember, I mean, spoiler alert, but if you haven't watched the movie, it's been what 35 years. But
Like try 22, 42. I mean,
42, there you go. I was going to say 1980 to now. Yeah, that's right. uh is that ending scene where she gets her head hacked off, and you just see it's in slow motion, and you see her fingers going like this as she sort of starts to collapse. I remember Leon Alcantar describing that to me in just vivid detail, and before I actually saw the movie, I felt like I saw that scene.
it's funny. Go back and watch it now. We're talking about the special effects. Well, Tom Savini is the one that cuts the head off because he knew exactly where to do it. And, being the high tech production that was, it was actually his apprentice that had like put on the sweater and everything. And they had her fake head, and apparently it was only held on by like toothpicks. So Tom Savini knew exactly where to cut and knock it off. And then the funny thing is, when you see the hands come up, you see hairy knuckles. Go back and watch it. Like this big old, looks like a class ring and hairy knuckles. Like again, it's one of those things that you go back and you're like, oh my God, how did this thing ever make money? But it was so incredibly awesome for the time.
Never even noticed that, man. Is that something that you've known all along, or did you just realize it with research that you did?
I had noticed it. Like I noticed the hairy knuckles at first, but I noticed the ring, and I'm like, that ring looks really out of place. And then I'm like, I stopped it. I'm like, oh my God, those are hairy knuckles. And then I read about it later on, and found out that that's why. Like again, nobody thought anybody would ever see this movie.
That's hilarious.
So go back and watch it. A little bit of an interesting trivia again for those that see it is the first kill, if you remember, were the two counselors. Supposedly, a year after the accident when Jason drowns, it's the camp counselors again having sex, and they get murdered, presumably by Mrs. Voorhees. The first guy that gets killed, the first death ever in a Friday the 13th movie, and there's been a lot of those deaths in a Friday the 13th, but the very first one, the guy wasn't even an actor. I guess he was a production assistant. Again, low budget movie, right? Hey, dude, you're going to be the one in here and you're going to get, taken out. So the very first person that gets taken out was a production assistant, wasn't even an actor in the movie.
Well, they did what they had to do, and hey, man, it was successful.
Yeah, they did. But there was actually I don't know if this is an urban legend or not, but there was actually a real murder on the set.
Really?
Okay, so I'm sure you don't remember this scene, but there is a scene where a snake gets into the cabin and they chop the snake off. That was not, apparently that wasn't a special effect. That was a real snake, and it was somebody's pet, and they didn't tell him they were going to do that.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, that apparently was a real murder on set,
Poor snake. Well, it died for a very noble cause in the end. Its death has been documented for eternity.
right? And I'm sure the guy at the time was like, they said, just completely upset. But, like you said, his snake lives in infamy now. So, yeah, what are you gonna do? But again, going back to this movie that they we talk about how nobody expected it to do well, nobody expected it to do anything. The motion picture, oh geez, the MPAA, I don't know exactly what it stands for, motion picture blah 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 blah, that gives movie ratings, right? Back in those days we had what, G, PG, we didn't have PG-13, we had G, PG, R, and X. Those were the
Right.
four ratings that we had.
Right.
And this one they gave an R. And if you go back and compare it to, Texas Chainsaw Massacre or even Halloween, Friday the 13th had way more gore than either of those movies. Like a lot of the stuff we think about in Halloween or um, even with, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was more shown off screen and it was what our mind was thinking of. But go back and watch it, there's not a lot of blood. So the MPAA gave them an R rating, even though there was a lot of blood in it and a lot of gore, for the same reason. Nobody's ever going to see this movie. So for the second one, the sequel, they actually had to cut back on the gore to get an R rating because they're like, now they were smart to them and they're like, oh yeah, people are going to go see this movie and we got to, lower the gore a bit.
Right. That's
So
crazy. Wow.
yeah, it's a little bit interesting. So I thought so. Um, but of course, they did have a sequel, and they had a lot of sequels, and eventually Jason became the killer in the second one. Didn't wear the hockey mask. Not sorry, it's the only thing I had with a hockey mask or Friday the 13th type of thing. Um, Still 80s Miracle on Ice, 1980 Olympic hockey team. So shout
That
out.
works. That works.
So, but again, he didn't actually start wearing the hockey mask till 1980, or I'm sorry, till the third Friday the 13th. And the second one, remember, he was wearing that stupid burlap sack.
Oh gosh, I'd forgotten about that. You're right.
Yeah, so puts it on in the third one. So, and originally they didn't even think there was going to be a sequel. So the movie originally ended with the character, I want to say her name was Alice, the woman who survives, and it was going to end with her in the canoe just on the water, and you're going to see the music start coming up with the credits. And then I guess the producer goes, no, we have to have like this scare like Carrie, where at the end of Carrie where the hand comes out of the grave. He goes,
Right.
we need something like that. And the guy's like, well, what the hell are we going to do? I'm like, oh, how about we keep talking about Jason? Why don't we have Jason? And the director's like, yeah, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And so they eventually, he didn't have the money, he didn't care. So he said, all right, fine, we'll give you Jason. And yeah, so quite interesting that that spawned so many of the sequels, was something that was kind of a throwaway at the end because the producer wanted that last scare to kind of rip off Carrie.
Yeah, that's too funny, man. And the sequels they came with are like outlandish. I remember like Jason in New York and I think Jason in Outer Space or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't even know which one that they ended up on. I just lost
Road to
interest.
Hell, Chase Manhattan, you know.
Was there
I
like a Jason versus Freddy or something like
they
that?
did that. Yeah. That was actually a lot of fun. That was a good one.
Yeah.
But that was probably my favorite of the sequels. I mean, it got pretty outlandish. Corey Feldman was in one, was in another one. I don't know if it was Jason Lives. They always teased you it was going to be the last one. And of course, we all are stupid and go see it. And it turned out it wasn't the last one. And we go again. Like I remember one time, he was dead and buried, but they needed to dig him up. And then they stabbed him with, this pole, and of course he gets hit by lightning, and all of a sudden he's alive again, kind of like Frankenstein's monster. And yeah, so Jason keeps ticking. And
Apparently.
they even remade it. So a few years back, they did the remake of Friday the 13th, which I thought was interesting because it's, the original, like we said, Friday the 13th only had Jason for like what, 10 seconds.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah, and this Friday the 13th remake was all Jason. So they didn't really remake Friday the 13th as much as make the concept.
Huh.
I don't
That's
know
very
who would have
disappointing.
thought.
Yeah, that's a little disappointing. At least to me. I mean, if you're gonna do a remake, you want to stay somewhat true to the original.
Yeah. Did you ever see the remake?
No, no, I didn't even know that they had a remake.
Yeah. So it was okay. The interesting thing for me was the guy that played Jason was Derek Mears. And Derek Mears is an actor, a stuntman, and him and I used to train together. So, I trained karate with him, and then I asked him if he'd help, train me in some jujitsu. Because back then you couldn't, this was around 2002, 2003, you couldn't find a jujitsu studio. And so he knew some jujitsu and was pretty good. And so he started training me, me and this other guy from our class. So I trained with Derek quite a bit. So when it turned out that he got, the role of Jason Friday the 13th, I'd be driving by billboards and there'd be, Derek as Jason. I tapped that dude out. I made him submit. I did that. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, the guy that plays him, Derek Mears, I tapped the dude out. And I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not like you tapped out Jason. In my mind, it is. In my mind, it is.
Uh,
Um, Now I got to ask you, as a musician and composer and keyboard player, um, what did you think of the very simple music that was accompanied Friday the 13th?
you know, it it's effective. It's super effective, right? And it doesn't need to be complicated to do the job that it needs to do. What I remember the most, though, is that that's I didn't even remember the theme music until I recently looked into it. But it was just and that was so simple, right? And actually so stupid, but my God, it worked. It made everything super intense, and it was I think it was genius, absolute genius.
Yeah, so he just took the Ki from kill and then ma. So it's because everyone thinks it's just repeating kill.
Uh-huh.
Actually not. And one of the things I thought that was really interesting, saw an interview with the composer, um, is he wanted to not look like, because again, this was, the first of its kind where they're kind of following, the person, and the camera is supposed to be the killer, right? You're seeing the camera view is supposed to be the killer's eyes,
Right.
something that they really started with. And so if you go back and watch it, he said, he only wanted the music to come on when there was going to be a kill. So when it's going to be Mrs. Voorhees, or later on when it's Jason, he wanted it to be, like, you weren't, it wasn't just the camera following this person, that they were truly in peril. So I thought that was a very interesting way to look at the music for it, because the music probably helps make most of these movies.
Oh,
I
definitely.
can't
It adds
imagine Jaws without John Williams' score.
it adds a lot, and it's one of those things that people don't really think about. I mean, if they were to go back and watch the movie without any music, then they would notice it. But when you're in the moment, I mean, it's just helping build the mood, right? It's helping just build the momentum of the fear or whatever it's trying to invoke. And the viewer's not really even noticing it, right? It's just part of the whole experience. But if it wasn't there, that they would notice it.
Yeah, definitely. It played such an important part to it. Um, the funny thing is, there was such a backlash too, about these movies. I don't know how I used to watch Siskel and Ebert pretty religiously. When they would do the movie reviews and stuff to kind of let me know what I should see, or maybe sometimes they'd lead me in just the way they describe something. I'd be like, I want to see that, and you'd see a little clip of a movie. It's not like today where you can go and check clips and 80 million reviews. You didn't have that luxury. But I remember that they were just so disgusted by this movie that they apparently Gene Siskel in his written review actually posted Betsy Palmer's home address.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, can you imagine doing that in this day and age?
Wow.
Which I thought was pretty crappy because it's like, okay, you don't like the movie, that's cool, but to put somebody else out there, I mean, you don't know. Like I said, she didn't do it because she thought it was Gone with the Wind. She did it because she needed the money.
Right.
It's like you weren't sending her the money, so what do you care?
Yeah.
She,
That's really messed up. That's really messed up. It's a little immature actually, if you ask me.
it was very immature. And I remember a couple of years later was when that actress Rebecca Schaefer got killed by a crazed fan. So you just don't know how people would react to some of this stuff. There's unhinged people everywhere, and they could read that and go, oh, maybe somebody's going there just to get her autograph or get a photo, but that's quite the invasion of privacy, and could potentially have put her at risk.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Just because she wanted a paycheck to help pay for her car. So, but yeah, I think that's about it. I think we've kind of Friday the 13th out. Um, Probably most people are like I said, most people were here Friday the 13th and figure we're going to talk about Jason and his hockey mask and his machete. And no, he was like about 10 seconds of the movie.
Yeah,
No,
if
really.
that, if that.
Yeah, he jumps out and that's it.
Yep.
And it's apparently worked well because I don't think the director came back. He's like, who's going to want to see this stuff? But I think the thing that was funny is they show him Jason as this very, childlike person in the original Friday the 13th. And then by the second one, he has this growth spurt. He's like 6'5", 250 pounds or whatever he is supposed to be. It's like, kind of interesting. Because if you think about what he was supposed to have drowned in the mid 50s, so he wouldn't have been a kid when he jumps out of the water. He would have been probably like a 40-year-old man, and they portray him as a little kid. And there's even been some question. I was like, was that supposed to be real or just something in her mind too? So
Right, right.
I don't know if they've ever really come out and said exactly what it was supposed to be, but I don't know.
Guess we'll have to guess into eternity.
If anyone knows the answer, let us know because I couldn't find that. I've tried to watch some of the stuff on it and look it up, and I don't know. So for another time, we'll wait for Ant's corner. He probably knows the answer to that.
Ant knows everything.
He does. You think we're good? Anything you want to add?
No, man, I think we've covered a lot, and it was really great sort of reliving the movie. It's again, I've got to go back and watch it. I'm afraid that I'll go back and watch it and go, oh my God, this was really, really stupid. Yeah. I'll be looking for the hairy knuckles.
Yeah, like glass ring. Go check it out. You can't miss it. Well, the next episode we're going to be continuing our horror theme and 80s horror movies for Halloween. And it's one that I can watch a million times and I still don't get sick of, and it's still not cheesy or will change the opinion of it. And that's, of course, The Shining. So I look forward to, going back to Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and the Overlook Hotel and reminiscing about that one. So that'll be our next episode.
Spectacular movie. Absolutely looking forward to that one.
All right. Well, we'll do it in about a week. So as always, guys, we appreciate you watching. Let us know in the comments what you think. Please give us a like, give us a, hit the subscribe button. And Lewis, take us out, brother.
Peace out.
Thank you, guys.